Welcome back to another episode of the Top 10 Smart Skills. The job is easy, the people are not. Today I am with one of my favorite people on this planet, Dr. Hadija Mohd, and we're going to talk about followership, which I have to say it was a skill that I never really thought about. I thought followership was the opposite of leadership. And once I had to practice being a manager, and once I had to practice being a leader, I realized that we emphasize a lot leadership, but we actually don't really talk about followership, which it's a really essential skill. And Hadija will explain her views on followership, but what I always thought is followership is not just following your boss, right? Hadija, what is your own definition of followership? And once again, I'm going to take notes because Hadija is a professor with me and we both teach smart skills. So every time I talk to you, I learn new things. So what's your definition of followership? How do you see it?
Thank you, Loredana. I see followership as a shared mission. So it's not necessarily an opposite to leadership, but basically to be among leaders and other followers to drive through the organization, the group, the project towards the shared mission within the shared values.
Yeah, so that's how I started to understand it recently. That is, rather than just saying, I'm going to follow my boss, which we have to, right? We all have a boss. Even bosses have bosses. But I think the way you and I both understand it is that we're a lot more aware and intentful about following the mission, following a purpose, following a goal, as opposed to, trying to dismantle it or go behind it or right?
Exactly.
So let's think a little bit if you can think of a positive example, either in your professional life, your organization, your past, where you thought that followership played a really important positive role and had a positive impact.
All right. So I just wanted to reiterate, when I first heard you say it years ago, that even your bosses have boss. So remember that. So I was in a meeting, and when you said that really struck a chord and a realization in me. So it's not a submissiveness.
No,
Other people who are superior to us, they also answer to somebody else. So it's a chain of leadership and followership towards the same mission. So to your question, at the top of my head, I think being in this organization, if I could choose ASB as my example, is when 2 years ago, when we were not very clear about the whole SOPs in terms of the lockdowns. We knew
the pandemic, right?
The beginning of the pandemic. So we heard that it was there from December 2019, and then we were in February 2020, and we were not very clear of what was going to happen.
Yeah, nobody was. The whole world was thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. Everybody was reacting the way they wanted, the way they thought it was correct.
Exactly, and we were just very anxious. And of course, naturally, we would go to our leaders, right, to get some guidance, some clarity. And this organization, being cognitively ready, we did prepare our organization, we did prepare our employees. And I observed at that point in time that us knowing the values of that decision, the values of that objectives, like why did we have to prepare ourselves to go hybrid? Why did we have to prepare ourselves to go into 100% online in a lockdown situation?
Almost overnight.
Without the government's instruction for us to go lock down. So I think the leadership of the company was very, very cognitively ready, but I also appreciated the employees being really good followers, understanding the values of the mission.
I think that's a really good example. And if I think about, this pandemic really created a lot of complicated conversations around the world. And you can actually see where there was dissent in leadership. There was dissent in followership. And once again, I don't mean followership as the boss said so, we all follow, but it's once you believe in something and once you agree on something, then we're all going to follow through, right? I think a lot of people, I was just reflecting as you were speaking, I think a lot of people think, for example, of either somebody like Mother Teresa to be an amazing leader, and I believe that. But I also think that somebody like her or Gandhi, or my favorite person in the planet today, which is Greta Thunberg, I don't think that they are just leaders. I think they're actually amazing followers of a vision, of a mission. That if you look at Greta, she is so she's such an amazing follower of her beliefs.
Yep.
And I think that's also why people follow other people, because you don't just believe in the person, which can be a little bit dangerous, right? We'll talk about that soon. But you actually believe in what that person, what the company, what that institution believes in, and you follow through. So I think of you as somebody who is a master in followership. I think of you that you have a very high degree of followership. And once again, I don't mean that you follow the boss, but I think of you as somebody who, once you believe in something, you follow through, you build up, you add your own. How did you develop this skill? I mean, you are truly extraordinary, but were you born this way? Are people born smart? Were you born with amazing followership skills?
Thank you, Loredana, for thinking so kindly of me. Actually, I was not born with this followership trait. In fact, I would say myself as a natural leader when I was a kid. For some reason, I had this charming affinity and traits to people. Thank you so much. I was just very, very magnetic. And the neighborhood kids, I wasn't in school yet, so I was really, really tiny. Neighborhood kids just flocked on me. And I was basically the queen bee when I was, 3, 4, 5, 6, right before kindergarten. So everybody just they just wrapped around my fingers. And then I could learn, I learned to read and calculate really, really early because I love watching TV shows. So I was their teacher. Yeah. So they didn't go to school, they learned how to read and write from me. So I had that value proposition. But things got complicated as time moved on because people got cleverer, apparently.
I see.
And I stayed behind because that's all that I could offer to them, and they could now learn to read, write, calculate, and then that's it, because I didn't go to school yet. That factor, as well as the factor that I was a bit of a dictator.
It's one thing we have in common, just so you know, guys. We plan to take over a little country, a rich one, right? We'll have to fight over it like true dictators do. So you were a little bit dictatorial in your approach of teaching others.
Exactly.
And then what happened? I think a lot of dictators have natural followers, but are those the right ones?
I think they were probably getting cleverer, like I was mentioning earlier, and my value proposition wasn't that attractive anymore. Yeah. And I realized that I started to lose that magnetism. So throughout my teenage years, I was no longer a leader. And as an adult, I realized why. It's because I was a terrible follower myself. I just wanted to be a leader. Yeah.
Interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking, is there something there that has to do maybe with a little bit of arrogance?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I never thought of you as an arrogant person. But you had that in the past? Do you think that there's a relationship between how people look at you if you exhibit a little bit too much arrogance?
I think so. I think I had a really big punch on my face growing up when I didn't realize that was the reason, my arrogance. I think it fits onto my ego. And when you don't have anything else to offer, when you only have this facade, the attractiveness, you're a little bit slightly more clever than other people. And then when it's gone, it's gone. You need that humility, you need other value propositions, you need to also give back to the community.
Yeah, you need a lot of other smart skills, right?
True.
You need validation, not just for yourself, but for others. You need a high degree of humility because you just realize, maybe I'm not really everything that I think I am. But I think that more than anything, you probably need to grow. And I think I'm always fascinated by the relationship between arrogance and confidence. And I always say, and I think you heard me say this many times in class, but I think arrogance and ignorance are best friends. And I think confidence should only come from competence. And I'm not saying that you were an arrogant child, but there is very naturally, there's a natural process to feel like, oh, look at me, I'm getting validated by so many around me. My ego feels really good, right? So I think there's something there to be said about, I think arrogance feeds the ego, but it doesn't necessarily feed your growth.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think as a child, I was not a very confident child because I was looking for outside factors for my internalities. So the arrogance...
Outside validation, maybe,
outside
right?
validation, exactly. Therefore, as an adult with slightly higher self-esteem, with more self-confidence, I don't need the arrogance. I need the humility, the knowledge, this humbleness in order to be confident within my own skin. Yeah.
It's interesting that you learn very early on. It's interesting that as a child, you had this... you had this awareness of your leadership skills, and then later on you took probably a little bit of a humble pie from your environment and your reality. When I think of somebody who has this mastery of followership, and if I think about how you learn to move on a little bit from being the boss of the bunch, if you want, right? The queen bee, like you said, is there something that other people can learn from your story? Is this story generalizable? Can somebody else learn how to be a good follower by sort of thinking about your story?
Absolutely. I think they don't have to share the same personal story, but I think followership and other smart skills are a need, a necessity.
Yeah.
You need to interact in your community. You need to extract values from the community, and therefore you have to give values. There is this interaction, everyday interaction within that community, within that organization, being a leader, a follower. So I do think this personal experience can actually be generalizable, and definitely the adoption of the skills can be generalizable.
Yeah, I think it requires a much higher level of self-awareness, constant awareness, which I think it's probably the highest value for me of this project, because I can be in a meeting now 3-4 years later into this project, and I see a behavior, but now I have the words for that behavior. I can recognize when somebody does something because they have a very high need for validation. And I might not be as judgmental as I am, but let's be very honest, I still am, so I'm a work in progress, but I recognize that behavior, and maybe I don't go after them that hard. Right? Or every now and then I'm reminded that maybe I need another humility dose, because the more I know, the less I know. So I feel like one of the things that we're doing at ASB is we're trying to teach others how to develop smart skills. And I was in a conference recently where a colleague of mine, a professor, said, I teach soft skills, and as we know, we cannot assess and teach soft skills, so I actually don't know really what I do. And I was smiling because I was thinking, you and I, we both teach smart skills because we don't think of them soft. So can we teach smart skills, and can we assess smart skills in others, and if so, how?
Oh, definitely. First of all, I would love to make a comment on the semantics themselves. I think the school yourself, Professor Fine, I think it's a genius that we are trying to break through the semantics, because like you've said many, many times, soft and hard, they cannot exist in the same environment. One can only be soft at a time and hard at a time. But smart and sharp, they do exist in complementarity and in this dual balance. And we also appreciate the concept of the Asian culture, yin and yang, where they actually complement each other. So I think that's really brilliant. In terms of assessing smart skills, other than existing and expanding empirical and scientific studies in organizational behaviors that we actually keep on referring to when we do teach our students and our staff, we can also assess based on our even anecdotal observation, right? We can create our own gap analysis from a baseline. If we were in a meeting, we can see a group of people, probably before we could not assess the language of their behaviors, but now we speak in the same language. We know this is humility. We know this is validation. Oh, that's followership. So now we are in an environment where the language is similar, and we can recognize that in each other. And then as we move forward with this interaction, we can see from the baseline, we have actually improved a little bit in terms of that smart skills. We get smarter, basically.
You teach smart skills, right? We both teach smart skills. How do you teach smart skills, and then what do you ask the students to do once they learn, if you want, the theory of, let's say, I don't know, cognitive readiness or followership or validation or managing up?
So we have this interesting formula, basically. So we have the smart and the sharp overlap, even when we're teaching a smart skill, right?
Of course.
So we want them to know the theories, the art of it, and then we want them to do the application or the science bit of it. And then we always relate it back to their action learning, because in an action learning project, they interact with the people in solving or co-creating solutions to the problem. So I find that overlapped formula, that model really, really work, because it gives like the comprehensive overview of how you can assess a situation. So as you call it, I call it the art and science of action learning, the smart and sharp of action learning.
And then on top of that, I think what we need to do a lot more is reflection. So you can't really just say, all right, here's the book on smart skills, right? Read the theory. you have to go and practice it, like you said.
Yep.
But I think more than anything, you have to come back and reflect on it,
Yep.
and then you have to repeat, right?
Yep.
Because I think of myself sometimes in behaviors where I'm like, I'm not really proud of how I handled that situation. What was that? Oh, I see. That was a lack of emotional maturity. Maybe next time I need to breathe 10 times before I say something, right? So I think for me, reflection is truly the mother of learning. And I think for somebody to truly become smarter, how you said it, not only that you have to learn what it is, put the right words to the right sentence, to the right skill. You have to go and practice it, but more than anything, you have to go back and reflect and then maybe repeat.
I find that really brilliant. The fact that you reminded me of the whole concept of teach, act, reflect, repeat.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliant, especially the repeat bit after the reflection, is because we all need a second chance.
And the third and the fourth.
Exactly, yeah.
Because the job is easy, the people are not.
Exactly. And I find that when we are less critical about ourselves, we know that we can actually reflect and then go back and then be better than that previous situation. I think we can also be nicer and kinder to other people by applying the smart skills too.
Let me ask you a question about nicer and kinder, since you just mentioned it. Is being smart being nice and kind?
Well, those are behaviors, right? But behaviors can definitely be faked.
Yeah.
But smart skills are skills. It's a toolkit. Like we open our toolbox and then we apply a smart skill. But niceness and politeness, they get us around, but they are not sustainable.
Yeah.
A skill is sustainable. Therefore, if niceness, politeness, good mannerism are a reflection of your smart skills, brilliant. But if they're just like something that you plucked out of thin air, you cannot maintain that, you cannot sustain that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of narrative about, this, I think you called it in one of your sessions, you call it toxic positivity.
Yep.
Right, where you find, especially today, you find people to be overtly nice because otherwise they're afraid of being canceled or they're afraid of being attacked.
Yes, so that is problematic, isn't it? It's a toxic environment. Basically, it's an outcome of cowardness
or fear, right?
Fear. You're not brave enough to actually speak up your truth. You can actually speak up your truth by applying smart skills. It can be painful, it can be hurtful, but addressing it with all of these smart skills.
Yeah. I think that's really, really interesting. I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of fear of speaking up your mind, but there are ways of speaking up your mind in a smart way, right? And maybe the need for self-reflection comes even more into place. I'm thinking, so we have this interesting project that both of us are part of, which is we're trying to help our students assess their smart skills, and then we have a lot of these conversations about that. And I think what helps is what you said before, is we have a common language. So it turns out that both you and I have a very low humility index. There's this personality test that we did, and we were very surprised to find that out. But it turns out that maybe it's a different methodology, because, of course we're not going to admit we're not humble, which in itself defines that we're not. But I think knowing a lot more about each other and about yourself also gives you a self-correction mechanism.
True.
Right? Because now I catch myself and it's like, oh, yeah, I learned about that. Look at me, I'm doing it right now. Oops.
Yeah.
Let me do something about it.
So I think what you said was very interesting. The first reaction was like, hey, no way, I am humble. But that in itself validates the test results. But I love that we actually have a tool, a measurement tool, to have that baseline and then to actually go back and see where we were and then just be, like you said, a corrective mechanism. You catch yourself and then you try to apply smart skills.
One of my dear friends told me one time when I was complaining about something. I said, well, you know what, it is what it is. I can't change who I am. And she said, you cannot change, but you can be better. And I was like, ooh, that hurt because it was true. So you're not born smart in that sense. You're not born with the smart and sharp skills, but it's a constant work in progress.
Exactly.
So speaking of work in progress, let me bring us to the last question that I have for you, even though we could talk, the two of us, we could talk probably for 5 days. But what are your aspirations as a leader? So you're an amazing follower, but you're also a leader. What are your aspirations as a leader for your organization, for your community, for your family, for yourself, when you think?
I think to move forward towards a shared value, a shared mission, everybody to be on the same page and then interact with each other professionally, kindly, generously, and to actually let a few things slide, other things to be talked about, all within this compound or in an environment where smart and sharp are applied. I think that's also a safe environment. And as a leader, as a follower, I want to be in that environment where there is this social responsibility, a shared mission, shared values. Everybody is on the same page. And I think only there high performance can be nurtured further, and the organization could only thrive further. Yeah.
And maybe in that case, the job is easy and the people are easier too. Right, because when I started thinking about this book, I wanted very clearly to say, if the job is easy, the people are not. It cannot be a hard stop, right?
True.
If you want to get the job done, then you need to help people become better.
Yep.
And guess what? You and I are both people too.
Yep.
Thank you, Hadija. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Loredana.
Thank you, everybody. This was Followership with Dr. Hadija Mohd. As you have seen, we all have to be both followers, leaders. We all have to be both smart and sharp because, once again, remember, if the job is easy, the people are not. You are people, I am people, everybody's people, and we do make somebody's life hard at some point. I'll see you next time.